My husband laughed at me in a courtroom full of people and called me nothing. He sat at his table, the respondents' table, the side where people who think they've already won get comfortable, and he laughed. Not a chuckle, not a nervous giggle, a full, confident, dismissive laugh that echoed off the wood-paneled walls of Family Courtroom 3. "She's just a housewife," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She owns nothing." His parents, Eleanor and Richard Morrison, seated in the gallery behind him, actually clapped. Clapped, like this was a performance. Like their son had just delivered the winning argument in a debate competition. Like humiliating me in public was something to celebrate. The judge's gavel came down sharply. "Order. This is a courtroom, not a theater." But the damage was done. The message was clear. Derek Morrison and his family believed they had already won. They believed that 16 years of marriage entitled me to nothing because I had been just a housewife. They were about to learn how wrong they were. My attorney, Jacqueline Chen, leaned close to my ear. Her voice was barely a whisper, meant only for me. "We can fight this. We have the evidence. We can—" I touched her arm gently, stopping her mid-sentence. "Let him have the joint account." Jacqueline's eyes widened. "What? That's $47,000? "Let him have it. All of it. Don't fight for any of it." "Vivian, I don't understand." "Trust me." I turned back to face the courtroom, my expression serene, my posture relaxed. Derek was still smiling. His parents were still glowing with satisfaction. His attorney was shuffling papers with the casual confidence of someone who thought this case was already over. They had no idea what was coming. "My name is Vivian Okafor Morrison. I am 44 years old. I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, the daughter of Nigerian immigrants who built a successful logistics company from a single delivery truck into a fleet of 200 vehicles serving the entire Mid-South region. My parents taught me many things about business, about patience, about the difference between appearing weak and actually being weak. Let them underestimate you, my father used to say. Let them think they've won before the game is over. The sweetest victories come when your opponent has already started celebrating." Derek Morrison had started celebrating. Now I was about to show him the real game. I need to tell you about the 16 years that led to that courtroom. I married Derek in 2008, when I was 28 and he was 32. He was a rising executive at a regional bank, handsome and charming, from a family whose name was on buildings throughout Memphis. Morrison Bank, Morrison Foundation, Morrison Memorial Library, old money, old expectations, old ideas about what wives should be. For the first 5 years I worked. I had my own career in marketing, my own income, my own identity. But when I got pregnant with our first child, a pregnancy that ended in miscarriage at 14 weeks, everything changed. Derek suggested I take time off. "Focus on your health," he said. "Focus on us. We don't need your income." 1 year of time off became 2. 2 became 5. 5 became 16. By the time I realized what had happened, I had become exactly what Derek's family had always wanted: a housewife. Someone who managed the home, hosted the dinner parties, supported Derek's career, and asked permission before spending money. Someone who, according to Derek, owned nothing. But here's what Derek didn't understand about those 16 years. While he was climbing the corporate ladder at Morrison Bank, I was watching, learning, paying attention to every conversation, every phone call, every meeting that happened in our home. While he was dismissing me as just a housewife, I was building relationships with his colleagues, his clients, his business partners, people who saw me as Derek's charming wife, but who told me things they would never tell him. While he was assuming I had no financial acumen because I didn't have a job, I was studying, reading, taking online courses in business, accounting, and corporate law. And while he was building his official career at Morrison Bank, I discovered something he thought I was too stupid to notice: the side company. I found out about it 3 years ago. Derek had been acting strangely. More secretive phone calls, more late nights at the office, more password changes on his devices. I assumed he was having an affair. I was prepared for that. I had mentally rehearsed that confrontation 1,000 times. But what I found was worse. I was doing laundry, the invisible labor of a housewife, when I found a receipt in Derek's jacket pocket. not a restaurant receipt, not a jewelry store receipt, a business expense receipt from a company I had never heard of, Meridian Consulting LLC. I started paying attention. Over the following months, I pieced together what Derek had built: a shadow company, registered under a combination of his middle name and his mother's maiden name. A company that had been siphoning clients from Morrison Bank for nearly 5 years. A company that existed in the margins of legal, funded by clients who trusted Derek's advice at the bank and then mysteriously ended up investing in ventures that happened to benefit Meridian Consulting. It was fraud. Elegant, sophisticated, white-collar fraud, but fraud nonetheless. And Derek thought I was too stupid to see it. I didn't confront him. Instead, I documented everything, every receipt I found, every phone call I overheard, every name that came up in connection with Meridian Consulting. I created a file, a comprehensive file that grew thicker with each passing month. Bank statements I found in his home office, corporate filings I accessed through public records, client lists I reconstructed from overheard conversations. I even found the separate bank account, the one where Meridian's profits were deposited, the one with $2.3 million in it, $2.3 million that Derek thought I didn't know about, $2.3 million that was about to change everything. When Derek announced he wanted a divorce, I wasn't surprised. He had found someone else, a 31-year-old junior analyst at the bank who made him feel young and powerful and important, someone who didn't know about his secrets, someone who saw only the charming executive, not the man who had built a shadow empire on fraud. "I want out," he told me one evening over dinner. "This marriage isn't working. I've already talked to a lawyer." "I understand," I said calmly. "What are you proposing?" "I keep my accounts. You keep yours. We sell the house and split the proceeds. Clean break." "And the joint account?" "That's mostly my deposits, but I'm willing to split it 50-50. Fair?" I pretended to consider this. "What about support? I haven't worked in 16 years. Derek laughed, the same laugh he would later deploy in the courtroom. "Support? For what? You've been living off me for 16 years. You can get a job now. You're not helpless." "Of course. I'll just figure it out." "Exactly. We'll both move on. No hard feelings." He actually seemed relieved, like he had expected a fight and was pleased to find none. He had no idea what I was planning. My attorney was Jacqueline Chen, a woman I had selected very carefully. Jacqueline wasn't just a divorce attorney. She was a forensic specialist who had made her reputation uncovering hidden assets in high-net-worth divorces. She had taken down CEOs, politicians, and trust fund heirs who thought their money was invisible. "Show me what you have," she said in our first meeting. I handed her the file. 3 years of documentation, corporate records, bank statements, client connections, the entire architecture of Meridian Consulting LLC. Jacqueline's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages. "Your husband has been running a shadow company for 5 years?" "At least." "Siphoning clients from his employer's bank?" "That appears to be the case." "And he has $2.3 million in a separate account that he hasn't disclosed?" "He thinks I don't know about it." Jacqueline looked up at me with an expression of pure professional admiration. "Mrs. Morrison, you've been busy. I've had 16 years with nothing to do but pay attention. This changes everything. These assets are marital property. This fraud is criminal exposure. We have leverage that most divorce attorneys would kill for." "I know. What's your strategy?" I leaned forward. "I want him to think he's won. I want him to walk into that courtroom confident that his housewife is going to roll over and accept whatever crumbs he offers. I want him to sign away the joint account, the legitimate one, and feel like he's escaped clean. And then? And then I want the judge to ask about Meridian Consulting." Jacqueline smiled, the smile of a predator who had just been handed a gift-wrapped meal. "I think I can arrange that." The divorce proceedings began 6 months after Derek's announcement. We went through the standard motions: financial disclosures, asset inventories, negotiations that went nowhere because Derek's attorney was convinced they had all the leverage. Derek's disclosure forms were creative fiction. He listed his salary, his official retirement accounts, his shares in Morrison Bank, all the things he was required to report. He did not list Meridian Consulting. He did not disclose the $2.3 million account. I said nothing. My attorney said nothing. We let him lie. We let him build his case on a foundation of fraud. We let him think that his housewife was too unsophisticated to catch him. Meanwhile, Jacqueline was preparing the trap. She had contacted Morrison Bank's legal department, confidentially, to verify that Derek was still employed and that no one at the bank knew about Meridian Consulting. She had subpoenaed bank records that Derek didn't know we had access to. She had prepared expert testimony on the valuation of Meridian Consulting's assets and the nature of Derek's fraud. And she had coordinated with the judge, discreetly, through proper legal channels, to ensure that certain questions would be asked at exactly the right moment. Everything was in place. Now, we just needed Derek to walk into the trap. The day of the final hearing arrived. Derek showed up looking like a man who had already won. Designer suit, confident smile, parents in the gallery ready to celebrate their son's victory over his uppity housewife. His attorney, a senior partner at one of Memphis's oldest law firms, carried himself with the easy arrogance of someone who had never lost a case to a woman. They were so sure, so completely, blindingly sure. I wore a simple dress, modest jewelry, the appearance of a woman who had accepted her defeat. Jacqueline wore a navy blue suit that meant business. The hearing began with standard procedural matters: asset division, the house, the cars, the retirement accounts. Derek's attorney presented their case. Derek had been the sole earner for 16 years. Vivian had contributed nothing financially. The marital assets were primarily Derek's creation, and he was being generous in offering a 50-50 split of the joint account. My client has no objection to a fair division, the attorney concluded. He simply wants to move on with his life. The judge turned to Jacqueline. Does the petitioner have a response? Jacqueline stood slowly. Your Honor, my client has reviewed the respondent's proposed division. She has one modification to suggest. Go ahead. My client is willing to waive her claim to the joint account entirely. All $47,000 can go to Mr. Morrison. Murmurs in the gallery. Derek's parents exchanged confused looks. Even Derek seemed surprised. That's unusually generous, the judge said. My client wants a clean break. She's willing to walk away from the joint account in exchange for a full and final settlement. Derek's attorney practically lunged at the offer. We accept. Wait, the judge said, holding up a hand. Before we proceed, I want to make sure we have a complete picture of the marital assets. Mr. Morrison, your financial disclosure lists your salary, retirement accounts, and bank shares. Is that comprehensive? Derek nodded confidently. Yes, Your Honor, that's everything. Everything? Everything. The judge looked at Jacqueline. Counselor, do you have anything to add? Jacqueline picked up a thick folder, the folder I had built over 3 years. Your Honor, we have reason to believe that Mr. Morrison's disclosure is incomplete. Derek's expression flickered. We would like to ask Mr. Morrison about an entity called Meridian Consulting LLC. The room went silent. I watched Derek's face as the words landed. First, confusion. He didn't understand how we knew. Then, fear. He understood exactly how much trouble he was in. Then, panic. He looked at his attorney, who was already flipping through papers, searching for something he didn't have. Mr. Morrison, the judge said, are you familiar with Meridian Consulting LLC? Derek's voice came out strangled. That's not relevant to this proceeding. I'll decide what's relevant. Answer the question. Are you familiar with this company? I've heard of it. Have you heard of it because you own it? Derek's attorney stood up. Your Honor, I'd like to request a recess. I wasn't aware. Sit down, counselor. I haven't finished my questions. The judge turned back to Derek. Mr. Morrison, did you disclose Meridian Consulting and its assets on your financial disclosure forms? It's not marital. Is that a no? Silence. Mr. Morrison, I'm going to ask you one more time. Did you disclose all marital assets, including any business interests and associated bank accounts, on your court-mandated financial disclosure forms? Derek's attorney dropped his file. literally dropped it. Papers scattered across the floor, because he had just realized that his client had committed perjury. In open court, on the record. Derek's voice was barely audible. "No, Your Honor." "No, you did not disclose them?" "No." The judge leaned back in her chair. "Then let me tell you what's going to happen now. We're going to take a brief recess while the petitioner's attorney provides me with documentation of these undisclosed assets. When we resume, Mr. Morrison, you will have the opportunity to provide complete and accurate disclosure. And depending on what that disclosure reveals, we will revisit not only the asset division, but also the question of whether criminal charges for perjury and fraud should be referred to the district attorney." Derek's face had gone completely white. His parents had stopped clapping. His attorney was on his hands and knees, gathering papers. And I sat at my table, hands folded, expression serene. Jacqueline leaned over. "How do you feel?" "Like a housewife who owns nothing," she laughed. "You own everything now." The recess lasted 2 hours. During that time, Jacqueline presented the judge with our complete documentation of Meridian Consulting, corporate filings, bank records, client lists, the $2.3 million account that Derek had hidden from everyone. She also presented evidence suggesting that Meridian's business model involved redirecting clients from Morrison Bank, potentially criminal fraud that could result in federal charges. When we reconvened, Derek was a different man. The confidence was gone, the laughter was gone, the certainty that his housewife would roll over and accept defeat, gone. His attorney had clearly advised him of the severity of his situation. Perjury alone was a felony. The fraud allegations could mean federal prison. His career at Morrison Bank was over the moment this became public. "Your Honor," Derek's attorney said, his voice subdued, "my client would like to request a brief continuance to reconsider the terms of the settlement." "I'll bet he would." The judge's voice was dry. "Petitioner, are you amenable to negotiation?" Jacqueline stood. "We are, Your Honor. My client is prepared to be reasonable." Reasonable cost Derek Morrison everything. The final settlement, negotiated over 3 days of intense back and forth, gave me 70% of all marital assets, including 70% of Meridian Consulting's value. The $2.3 million became $1.61 million for me. The house, fully paid off, worth $1.2 million, went to me entirely. Derek's retirement accounts were split 60-40 in my favor, recognizing my non-financial contributions to marital prosperity over 16 years. And in exchange for my agreement not to provide testimony in any criminal proceedings against him, Derek signed a confidentiality agreement and a commitment to repay the clients he had defrauded. His career at Morrison Bank ended the day after the settlement was finalized. He was given the option to resign quietly or face a very public termination. He resigned. His parents stopped clapping. In fact, Eleanor Morrison had to be escorted from the courthouse after the final settlement was read because she started screaming about gold diggers and entrapment. The judge's response was memorable. "Ma'am, your son committed perjury and fraud. The only person who entrapped him was himself." I walked out of that courthouse with my dignity, my documentation, and approximately $3.4 million in assets. Not bad for a housewife who owned nothing. The aftermath was everything I could have hoped for. Derek moved into a small apartment, the only thing he could afford after the settlement. His 31-year-old girlfriend left him within weeks of learning that his executive lifestyle was funded by fraud. His parents, embarrassed by the scandal, quietly distanced themselves. The Memphis business community, which had once celebrated Derek Morrison as a rising star, now whispered about him as a cautionary tale. And I started over. I used part of the settlement to buy a small house, modest, comfortable, entirely mine. I used another part to start a consulting business, leveraging the skills I had developed during 16 years of being dismissed as just a housewife. It turns out that hosting dinner parties teaches you event planning. Managing a household budget teaches you financial management. Supporting an executive's career teaches you strategic thinking. The skills Derek had dismissed were actually valuable. I just needed the opportunity to prove it. Within 2 years, my consulting business was profitable. Within 3, I had hired my first employee. Within 5, I had a team of 6 and a client list that included some of Memphis's most successful businesses. Some of them were former Morrison Bank clients. The irony was not lost on me. My mother came to visit the spring after my business hit its 5th anniversary. She walked through my office, the office I had built in the building I now owned, and nodded approvingly. "This is impressive. Thank you." "Tell me about the courtroom," when he laughed. I told her. The "just a housewife" comment, the clapping, the dropped file, the judge's questions, the white faces of Derek and his attorney when they realized what was happening. When I finished, she was smiling. "Your father would have loved this story." Would he? He always said that the most dangerous people are the ones who are underestimated, the ones who are dismissed as unimportant, because they're watching when no one thinks they're paying attention. I watched for 16 years, and you built a case that destroyed him without ever raising your voice. She sat down across from my desk, the desk where I now made decisions that affected dozens of employees and hundreds of clients. "Do you have any regrets?" I considered the question. "I regret the years I lost believing that being a housewife meant being powerless. I regret not starting my documentation sooner. I regret trusting Derek when the signs were there all along. But the divorce? The courtroom? The settlement? Not a single regret." He laughed at me in front of a judge. He called me nothing. His parents clapped. And then he lost everything because he was too arrogant to imagine that I might be paying attention. That's not revenge. That's justice. Maybe they're the same thing sometimes. My mother stood and hugged me. "Your grandmother used to say, 'Let them laugh. The last laugh is the only one that matters.'" She was right. She usually was. She stepped back and looked around my office one more time. "A housewife who owns nothing." I smiled. "A housewife who owns everything now." If this story resonates with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and whether you've ever been underestimated. Like and subscribe for more stories about patience, preparation, and the power of letting people think they've already won. "She's just a housewife. She owns nothing." He laughed when he said it. In court. His parents clapped. My lawyer whispered, "We can fight." I smiled. Let him have the joint account. He signed fast, like a man finally free. Then the judge asked about a certain side company, Meridian Consulting LLC, the one with $2.3 million in hidden assets, the one he didn't disclose. His lawyer dropped the file. His parents stopped clapping. His face went white. He thought I was just a housewife. He was right, but this housewife had been watching for 16 years, and I documented everything.